one woman and her Facebook page was literally keeping every other news organization in the nation in the know. We give up so much as journalists to do this work. It's because we love it. It's because we have to do it.
We literally are the history book for what has happened.
Trust is the outcome of us having access, transparency, and accountability.
This silly, crazy little newspaper thing that just fell in my lap is the most rewarding thing I have ever done in my life.
Through the conversation, so do you guys want to kick it off? Nikki,
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having us. Me and Anna are so honored to lead this panel and, engage in a discussion about such an important topic. So yeah, thank you guys all. I guess I just kind of want to start off the discussion by asking each of you which kind of moment from the film resonated most with you and kind of talk a little bit about why. Yeah. Do you wanna?
I can be first. I mean, obviously, that's home to me. So when I see Canadian, I see home. So the people that are in the screening, the ranchers, the women that are working in the newspaper, that's the language that I speak. And so it resonates with me. Like I said, it reminds me of my mom.
Well, for me, it's the kind of the closing of it, which is don't stop, right? Don't quit. Because I am a small town newspaper editor. I actually have 2 newspapers about the size of Lori's in this film. She's actually one of my mentors, so I call her and say, what do I do about this? So I actually own one of the newspapers in my hometown, and so I really identify with a lot of what she says about not being the most popular woman in town anymore, and taking criticism from people that you grew up with, that you love, that you respect. It's a really, really tough job. And then you layer on top of that it is hard to make a living off of these small newspapers. So it's an absolute labor of love. But if you believe in democracy, if you believe in the free press, if you believe in American values, you understand how essential these newspapers are to especially small communities, and in particular rural communities who do not have access to the same kind of information that urban communities do. So.
Yeah, I think, for me, someone who went to Canadian to do a story on the paper, I was like, oh, I've been there. But for me, journalism, it's the only thing I've ever done. And so I could really resonate with Lori and this idea of it's a life's work. And I am, I wake up every day and I'm just so grateful that I can do this because I know so many people cannot. This is a hard industry. It's an industry that, despite what some politicians and talking heads would like you to think, there's not a whole lot of money in it. I am very grateful. I'm well fed at the Texas Tribune, but it's hard, and we have to give up we give up so much as journalists to do this work, and yeah, it's because we love it. It's because we have to do it. It's because we don't know who would do it if we didn't. And so, yeah, I think all of that was very relatable.
Yeah, in doing some research prior to coming to watch this film into local news here in Texas, just wanted to share this with everyone here and you guys, that between 2005 and 2022 in Texas, we've lost about 1/3 of our local newspapers. And as a result, at least 27 Texas counties have no local newspapers at all. So turning to you panelists, what do you guys think are the most critical things a community loses when you lose the local newspaper? What can't be replaced by social media or regional outlets or national news? And I think they touch a lot of the topics in the film, but I'd love to hear from you guys.
Yeah, if I can just add a little bit more context to that, which is most of those counties that do not have a newspaper are outside of what we like to call the Texas Triangle. How many of you know what the Texas Triangle is? All right, some of you do. That is basically the region of Dallas, Austin, San Antonio, and Houston, right? And most people live in Texas inside the Triangle. Most of all the other counties outside of the Triangle are largely rural. They're largely small, and that is fine. But most of the counties that have lost their local news sources are those counties that are rural and outside of that sort of power structure. I think that's really important to remember, that when we're talking about who doesn't have access to news, it is a very specific type of Texan. And we can't forget that, right? So that's number one. Number two, what happened right after, by the way, the Canadian Record did close. I know the movie ended on a very hopeful note, but if you did not know, I'm sorry, spoilers. The Canadian Record ended up closing in 2023. And immediately after that, almost immediately after that, was the largest wildfire in Texas history in the Panhandle. Lori, her newspaper was not there to cover it, but she was actually, she has kept her Facebook page open and active, and she was the source of news on that wildfire. One woman and her Facebook page was literally keeping every other news organization in the state, in the nation, in the know. We relied on her. And that is, I can't even imagine what we would have done if it was not for her. I can't imagine what the people of Canadian and the Panhandle would have done if it were not for Lori and now her Facebook page. The fact of the matter is, and I'm sorry, I'm on a soapbox right now, the people who are not trained to do journalism, they can do great work. I don't want to take away anyone who is on Instagram or TikTok, new people who are coming up as creators. But we as journalists are trained how to verify information, how to get information out quickly and succinctly and correctly. Again, we don't always get it right, but at the very least we have that skill set that we rely on to get information out that is verifiable. And if I can just really quickly point to a different natural disaster in East Texas, which also has a dearth of news organizations. During some floods, there was a lot of I don't want to say fake news, there was a lot of misinformation going on in social media groups that we had to bat away, that we had to help sift through, because we did not have a trained news gatherer out there putting out good, concrete information. And so I know that journalists can get a bad rap as gatekeepers, but it's because we've been trained to help sift through information and to help people make sense of what's happening in the world. And that's what gets lost.
Yeah.
Oh.
And some of us are journalists in training, like me, who did not actually train in journalism, but is training in journalism. So, but I did have a background in political and government, so I was able to kind of translate some of that knowledge. But to go back to answer the question, I think that when I was asked to take over the newspaper in Spearman, the reasons that I did it are the answer to your question, which is, number one, the newspaper is the storyteller of our community. And so it's the place where we celebrate our successes, where we talk about our failures, and where we think about ways that we can be a better community. That all happens in print in the newspaper. Because it is a weekly conversation with your readers and your supporters. And that conversation is that's what's being talked about in our community. It's also the history book for our little town. Our newspaper, the Hansford County Reporter-Statesman, has actually it's one of the oldest businesses in the county. So it's been in operation for over 100 years. And we literally are the history book for what has happened in Hansford County. And that's really, really important. And then the third reason for me, because I do have a background in government, was that we have to have some way to hold our government institutions and our communities accountable. Yes, and in our nation and in our state. And that is what the newspaper does. And so, it was said in the movie, Lori is at every meeting. I'm at every, well, I cover 5 communities now, so I'm not at every meeting, but I'm at the important meetings, and I'm there being the watchdog. I'm there paying attention, and I'm letting the community know the things that they need to be worried about, or concerned about, or they need to speak up on. And so without a newspaper, there's no radio station there covering things the way that I do, and we have an online, she calls herself a newspaper, it's not a newspaper. She's not there covering the things like I am either. And so those are the reasons that these community newspapers are important. And just like Nick said, there's a group of people out there that need this information. They need these institutions to stay strong. So.
And you mentioned earlier getting criticism from the community, and she mentioned it in the film also, and it kind of hints at the difficulty of reporting about certain stories, especially political stories, in small conservative communities where everybody knows everyone. So in this industry, in this line of work, what are your strategies for building trust with sources who may be skeptical of journalism, who might not be willing to talk to journalists, and how do you tell those stories when sources are hard to reach?
Well, I can actually tell y'all an example that just happened to us last week. And I will say that, unlike Lori, I'm actually a conservative Republican, so I am a little bit more philosophically and politically in line with my community, although I still get called an Austin liberal because I lived here for a few years, so that makes, I'm no longer allowed to be a part of my community. I've been stained, yes. But so politically, I really do align with my community, but I also try very hard to, I guess, make them think and really understand why they believe the things that they do. And especially in this environment where, I don't know, conservatives aren't actually conservatives anymore. It's just a label that we throw out there, but philosophically we've kind of lost our way. So it's been an interesting journey to do that. But to your question, in terms of building trust, I think showing up, being there, telling the stories, good, bad, and ugly, you end up on all different sides of things over time. But just this, so I'm very critical of our city. That's kind of my special passion, is to keep our city in line. And they don't like it very much, but I go to every city council meeting and I pay attention, and there's been a trend developing that I've been writing about, which is, there's very little accountability, they're fiscally not being responsible. There's some leadership issues, both with the council and the city administration. So I've been sort of slowly writing stories to kind of show this theme out. Well, what happened last week, 2 weeks ago, was we have a small volunteer fire department of 22 volunteers. 10 of those volunteers resigned from the fire department over leadership issues and fiscal mismanagement and all the things that we have been sort of highlighting. And because I had been so bold about telling those stories, one of the firefighters was willing to come and we actually did a podcast interview, a 30-minute interview with her, and she laid out the entire story for me, basically in detail of what had happened to her and how the city manager had not supported them. They've been, talking for months with him, and anyway, so we sort of got the inside scoop, mostly because we'd just been telling the truth about what was going on, and they finally experienced it personally and realized that, this was an opportunity to maybe right the ship. So that was kind of an interesting situation there. You probably got a lot of good ones.
Well, I was thinking about how we met.
Oh, yeah.
So, talk about being held accountable. So, the Texas Tribune is headquartered here in Austin, but our founders and our leaders several years ago came to the realization that for us to best tell the story of Texas, we had to get out of Austin. Not that there's anything wrong with Austin or Austinites. Y'all are awesome. I'm a Dallas guy, just an FYI. He's shaking his head. Right. He's in a suit. He's not from here.
It's the pink
shirt. So we have placed reporters across the state in what we like to call our smaller communities in Texas, which would be big cities anywhere else, but Lubbock, Lufkin, Odessa, McAllen. And this team helps put on an event every other year called the Rural Symposium. And we were actually in Lubbock a few years ago, 2023 actually, and we're doing a live podcast, me and some journalists just like this, in the stage just like this. And then this woman gets up and she says, "You don't know what you're talking about." It was her. And so I made a promise that the next time I was in the Panhandle, I would reach out and I would come up and I would see her. And when I got assigned the story to do the on Canadian, Suzanne was not the first person I called. The first person was Lori, but she was the second because I knew I wanted to make good on my promise. And what good journalists are, number one, humble. We have to practice humility. We only know what we know. And it's our job to go out and ask a lot of questions so that we can learn more to share that knowledge with all of you. But we also have to recognize that if we're doing our jobs right, we're supposed to be in service of you all. It's not about my ego. It's not about my byline. It's about making sure you all know what I know in order for you to make the best decisions for your lives. And in order to do that, I have to listen to what is on your mind. I have to know what's important to all of you. So that what we've been doing at the Tribune over the last couple of years, particularly, has been going into these communities where our reporters live and hosting engagement events. We do a lot of live journalism events like this, but we're starting to do more open houses at coffee shops. We are having roundtable discussions with mayors and city council people and other civically engaged folks. So we are just showing up and, number one, listening. And that is, just so incredible. The act of listening in 2025, it's a pretty remarkable act. And people get really shocked when you do it. But it's the best thing any journalist can be doing right now.
Awesome.
I guess kind of connected to that question as well, as an aspiring and student journalist myself, I find that in the climate that we are in right now, it is becoming increasingly difficult for people to be open to speak with you as a source, especially about certain topics that are more sensitive, out of fear of whether it's losing a job or just fear of connecting their name to a certain topic or an issue. So I'm wondering, as you guys as journalists, how do you kind of navigate that, and what are kind of strategies that you guys use to get sources to speak about these kind of more difficult issues, especially right now during a time where people seem to be, whether it's fear or the lack of trust in journalists?
Yeah, the internet lives forever, and so a lot of folks are far more cautious than before, when your name would appear in a newspaper that the next day no one would ever see ever again. That said, I still believe people want to tell their stories. People still, human beings want to communicate, right? That's what sort of separates us from other animals, right? Like, we have to communicate. We have to talk to one another. We have to share our stories. So I just automatically assume everyone wants to tell their story. So when I approach a source, I just assume they're going to want to talk to me. I never go into a meeting worried that they're not going to do that, right? That said, people do. And what I have started to do, particularly since 2020, has been folks who don't normally engage with journalism. I take extra time to walk through my process as a journalist. I go over the rules of what's on the record, off the record. I explain to them, what the Texas Tribune is. I tell them about my backstory, why I do journalism, why I care about them. And I let them ask me questions. In fact, I was just in the RGV, the Rio Grande Valley, and I'm working on a story about young Hispanic conservatives, people who should, you would think would not trust, the scary Austin, Texas Tribune, but they all wanted to talk. And I made sure, after every conversation, I gave them an opportunity to ask me anything. We have to build. We have to build trust with our audiences, we also have to build trust with our sources too. And I have to remember that they are entrusting me to tell their story. And I tell everyone I ever interview, my number one job is to make sure that when you see whatever I write in print, you can say, yes, that is what I said. Yes, that is what I think. Yes, that is what I feel. I might have other people in that article who think differently than you. I might have a different thesis than what you think, but at the very least, I want to make sure that whatever is printed about you that I put my hands on, you can say, yes, he got that right.
I think for me, I think trust is the most important thing to think about in all of that, is build that trust. As a small town newspaper versus something like the Tribune, I actually try to avoid controversy because we are a little bit of a marketing tool for our community as well. So I want to work really hard to make sure that we're presenting our community's best face forward, right? So if we have a controversial topic, I really try hard to make sure that we present all sides of that and really tell the story of what happened in a positive way. So that makes a little, I'm not looking for like the hard-hitting story necessarily, except for when it comes to government. I'm always there with government. I'm all in.
I read your editorials.
I know. I do actually, I now write a weekly editorial, and it is,
it's
I
good.
love it. I love it. So, and to his point, I feel like my mission in the world is to explain to everyday, ordinary, urban Texans what rural Texas is really about and what we care about. And my thing I always say is, rural Texas is not an inner city problem that needs to be solved. We're a group of independent, strong, hardy people out there. We just want access to equal resources so that we can continue to live our lives. But so anyway, just trust, and then just like I said, trying to present the best story for that community. So.
I'll say one thing about the idea of trust, because the media as an institution is not the only institution that's lost a high degree of trust. We have our political institutions have a significant loss of trust. Our religious institutions have a loss of trust. Our business, all of our institutions, these large sort of institutions that have been so stable, have been in a steady decline. And a big part of that starts in the Vietnam War, where you see a significant decline of trust across the board, and it's rapidly increased in the last 4 years. And one thing that I always argue, or I make the case for, is that trust is not it's the outcome measure, it's the outcome variable, it's the dependent variable of other things and factors that contribute to developing trust. And what y'all are all saying is underneath those, what I think are the pillars of building trust. And one of those is accessibility. Do these institutions and do those individuals in that set of work or profession, are they accessible? Are they transparent in what they do? Do they have transparency in the sources and the information? And can the public have transparency in that? And then accountability. You know, if the paper is accountable to the people, they're going to recognize that, and it will build the trust. Ultimately, trust is the outcome of us having access, transparency, and accountability. And those are the building blocks among those of trust. So that would kind of be my comment on what you're saying.
And when talking about trust and accountability and that fear from sources to talk to journalists, I feel like a big topic that comes from that is freedom of press and freedom of expression, and being able to tell our opinions and being able to share them. And our First Amendment, which is one of the topics that the Kozmetsky Center has been touching on this semester, protects freedom of press, but it doesn't guarantee that free press will exist. What's the difference between the two things, and why does it matter?
You might have to take this one first. I have to think about that.
One of my favorite bumper stickers I've ever seen, and I wrote it down when I heard free press a few times before the movie started, and it says, "Talk is cheap, free speech isn't." And you know, like I was saying earlier, journalists are taught, you know, that what we're doing is a public good. We try to always get it right, to be of service, right? We are not just out there, you know, spewing whatever we want. Trust me, the number of things I have not said that would have gotten me into so much trouble is far greater than anything I have ever printed. I have to remember that I have a responsibility as a journalist to make sure that what I am putting out into the world is in service of moving the world forward, right? It is to engage, it's not to incite. It is to educate, not necessarily to aggravate, right? Now, that is not true for all journalists. That is not true for all media. You know, one of my favorite jokes from the White House Correspondents' Dinner, way back when we had such a thing, was CNN loves breaking news so much they actually broke the news. And that's true, right? There is journalism malpractice out there. And I will try to defend good journalists anywhere I can, but I also want to recognize that there is bad journalism. We're seeing a lot of, in the demise of local news, we've seen this phenomena called pink slime. Pink slime, has anyone heard that term before? So pink slime is the proliferation of these websites that look like newspapers, but they are put out by partisan machines. Or and this isn't exactly pink slime, but you know, in the Permian Basin, Midland, Odessa, Chevron, a company, has its own newspaper, right? I mean, again, with all due respect to Chevron, they have every right to put out whatever they want. That is freedom of speech. But it's not news, right? It is PR, and they are using certain practices that some people might consider deceptive. Everyone has freedom of speech, and I think that's awesome. I love the First Amendment. By the way, it's not the First Amendment because it was the most important, it's just the first one everyone could agree to. History. The first one I think was about paying themselves, but they couldn't find agreement. The idea is that just because you can say something doesn't mean you have to say it. And again, if you are practicing journalism or just good communication, you are running what you want to say through that filter, right? And that is the difference between free speech and free press. And I will just say one last thing before I give up the mic. Journalism is not cheap. It costs a lot of money to do good journalism. Yes, the Texas Tribune gives it away for free, but it is not because it is not inexpensive to produce. It is. I'm very, very, very expensive, and so if you do read the Texas Tribune, or very soon our new local newsroom, the Austin Current, please, please, please consider becoming a member. You can do so on our website. Every little bit helps. You know, newspapers used to sell subscriptions. We ask for members. There are plenty of great perks. You can see me afterwards if you are interested. And thanks for letting me get in a plug. But subscribe to a local newspaper. Give to NPR. Subscribe to a Substack that you might like, right? Suzanne's on Substack. Find a way to make sure you are paying for good, high quality information, because it takes a lot of money to get it out there.
Yes.
Why don't you hand out the evaluations for me? Hand those. Oh, you already did? Oh, never mind. Suzanne?
I think probably how I would answer that question is kind of talking about this information versus news, right? I feel like we're bombarded like constantly with information in this 24-hour news, or it's like the 1 hour news cycle. It's not even 24-hour anymore. You know, we follow certain things on our Facebook pages, on Twitter, and we're just constantly barraged with all of this information. But where the press and the journalism comes in is the ability to sort of filter out what's really important in that. And so that's what I still love about especially the print newspapers and what the Tribune does, which is just this real journalism, because I do think people just are overwhelmed with the amount of information out there. And I guess maybe that's kind of how I see this sort of free press versus sort of the freedom of, you know, speech information or issue.
So I'm going to give a different, I'm not a journalist. I have a PhD in political philosophy, but I was a lobbyist for a long time. And I'm going to give you kind of on the side of the lobby what a lobbyist and a group, like an interest group, would want out of the media. So I'm going to give that side of the story here. You know, as somebody that worked for a long time on behalf of lots of different groups, the goal was to get the Tribune to write a story that was very sympathetic to what we wanted. In fact, if we could get the story to be exactly how we wrote a press release or a press conference or whatever it was that we were doing, if we could get the Tribune to you know, put their stamp of sort of like, this is the side that's the good side, then that was what we were about. We weren't really that interested. I mean, just being honest, like, we weren't that interested in the idea of a free press. We were interested in the idea of a press that was on our side. And I don't think that's uncommon for any group in American interest groups or in politics to look at the press as a way to fulfill their narrative. And so how do we, I think my concern with that is always, well, how do we distinguish between information that groups are just, you know, generating for their own interest versus what is the truth on the issue? And self-interest is driving everyone into the public marketplace of ideas, but it's also one of the pieces of self-interest that I think we don't focus enough on is how we should limit self-restraint and the limits. One of the virtues, I think, in American society that I don't think we talk about very much is the self-restraint that people have. We don't have self-restraint. We don't put limits on our own you know, behavior or actions. And so the press, one of the roles of the press I see is to put those limits on groups that would seek all power, all dominance at all costs because they want that for their own benefit. So I'm curious to know from both of y'all how you're role as, the guardian in many ways of a democratic society, how you place limits on groups that are giving you information that's how are you going through that process to put the restraints when groups are seeking full power and dominance in that market?
I think for me, it's a little bit different just because I'm not getting, I guess we get a little bit of political kind of influence, I guess. But mostly we just make them pay for it. That's how we do it. So, we'll run it, but it's paid for, and then it's clear that, it's a piece that comes from, that side. Occasionally I will get, just kind of in a practical sense, I'll have interest groups send me op-eds or different things like that. And I just kind of vet that based on what I think my community cares about, what's relevant. I actually don't run a ton of that stuff just because, it just isn't relevant. I think the stuff I do run would be like health-related stuff. I think I ran like a dementia op-ed, or something like that. But so I think that's two ways that you could kind of filter out those things. And I like the stuff they pay for the most. So.
Yeah, I think the best follow-up question any journalist and really any person can ask when you're in a conversation is, how do you know that? Just give me a little evidence, right? Lobbyists can be right from time to time. You could be on the right side from time to time. I used to cover the State House in Colorado, and lobbyists were often some of my best sources. They always knew where the bodies were. I won't, if we're doing our jobs right, again, we're going to hear you and your client out, and we're going to print the best form of your argument. And then we're going to try to add a little context. We're going to try to go to, if there is another side, go to them. We're going to try and find people who are really affected by the situation, right? Like there are not just two sides to every story. There are 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, sides to every story. In fact, I just challenged one of my reporters. I was like, I want you to go talk to 12 people before you even come back to talk to me about this story, right? Because that's how, we live in a very complicated world. And again, lobbyists and folks in policy and politics, you can absolutely be right, but it's still our job to vet and verify and ensure that we are putting, whatever argument you have through the same sort of rigorous inquiry that we would anybody.
Yeah, we kind of talked about this a little bit in the panel discussion this morning, but how platforms like Facebook and Google really hold most of the power in terms of distribution and advertising revenue. But like I think you mentioned before, Nick, these platforms have no journalistic training or accountability measures either. We saw in the film that The Record obviously has both of these things, and other local newspapers, across the country do as well, but struggle to survive right now. So do you guys have any thoughts on how we can kind of fix this balance, or how we can keep local journalism alive?
How long do we have? I see some people nodding off, so I apologize. Look, there's no going back. I wish there was. Oh my God, I wish there was. But there isn't. So what we as news organizations have to do, and we have done this, we have to find a way to work as well as we can with these organizations, which, by the way, we also have an obligation to hold them accountable for. Google, Amazon, Apple News, is a huge driver of our traffic right now, like Facebook was back in the day. There was a time when I was at the Denver Post or even the Dallas Morning News, where if I didn't get my story on Facebook, I know no one would read it, right? Now at the Texas Tribune, it's like, okay, if our story doesn't get on Apple News, I know no one's going to read it. And so we have to use these platforms in the best ethical ways we possibly can. Also knowing that while they're sort of frenemies, right? They're helping us get our brand out there. They're helping us get our information out there. But we also know that we always want to be encouraging our readers to subscribe to us, right? We want to be directly in your inbox. So, maybe you're not ready to be a member yet at the Texas Tribune, which you can become a member at the Texas Tribune. But maybe you just want to start off by signing up for a newsletter, right? Give it a test. And so, making sure that people know how to engage with us, what we call off-platform. And then, just make sure that we are doing our very best to put our information out there so people know that there is some good, vetted, quality information going on those platforms.
So as an actual newspaper, the old-fashioned print kind, I know that my paper goes onto 500 kitchen tables or coffee tables in our 2 communities every week. So that's pretty powerful. So I can track, but I watch this story and I see Lori and I have nostalgia for, sitting at the desk, working on the computer, folks coming in the office, the whole thing that small newspapers are used to be about, unfortunately. But that's not my reality. That's not how my paper functions. We've actually had to go, we do all of our design. I do it on a laptop every week. I'm a one-man show also. I do it on a laptop every week. We print in Pampa, Texas, which is 45 miles away. We have to have our newspapers delivered to us. I have to have a girl come in just part-time to, do all the production, put the labels on. We have a vendor that does our, back-end stuff. I have what they call stringers that help me write articles, and I have a journalism program at the high school that helps me take pictures. So my deal doesn't work exactly like Lori's did, where you had an office full of staff. And so I think what I'm learning as an old lady who decided to take on 2 newspapers is learning to adapt to the new technology. So I want to preserve the print newspaper. It's very, very important to me. But I also understand that I've got to learn how to use and utilize these additional platforms. And so what I have done is I started a Substack, and so the column that I write for my newspapers every week, I also post on Substack, which is texasruralreporter.substack.com, if anybody wants to subscribe. And so I have a subscriber situation there too. And then I'm actually syndicating that article, and I send it out all over the state to other small newspapers and allow them to run it as well, just to get that different kind of news out there. And I cover, in that piece, I cover specifically Texas politics as it relates to rural America, or rural Texas. So it's a pretty unique kind of piece out there. But then I also, especially on local issues, I get on TikTok. So I now have a little TikTok presence, which is really funny because my daughter laughs at me that I don't do it right and my hair doesn't look good or whatever, but I do it anyway. And then we obviously are on, we're on Facebook. I'm super active on Twitter, which if you're in journalism, you must be on Twitter, because that is where a lot of things happen. You don't have to, I guess, be active, but you got to pay attention, because it's been amazing to me, the ability to get my brand, my newspaper and my personal brand out into the media world through just that simple little Twitter handle. And I guess I'm a little feisty too, so that when you call out the governor, you get attention, I guess. But Or I guess if you call up the Texas Tribune, you don't know what you're talking about. So that's important. You know, the little TikTok. I did a series on our local budget where I kind of explained the budget process and some different things. And over the course of I think it was 2 or 3 weeks that they did that budget process, I got 10,000 views on TikTok. So just figuring out how to keep the old but also integrate the new. And I think that's going to be the challenge, to come back to your question, for newspapers moving forward is, how do we meet people where they are, meet people where they want to get their news, and that's going to be the definition of success in terms of circulation. Now the monetizing of all of this, maybe give me another year or two on that. We'll figure that part out. So.
Okay, we're going to open up for some questions from the audience. So, do y'all have questions?
Easy.
We'll come back to you, Max.
Okay.
Up there, right in the middle. The young man in the middle.
Bruno.
5509.
5509. Yes. Bruno beat you to it.
Hi everyone, thanks for being here. I wonder, for local journalism to keep being the guardian out there, what can current journalist organizations do for the journalist students that are preparing to enter the workforce? Thank you.
I think I understand the question. So you're asking what can organizations do to help journalists enter the workforce? Is that right? Okay. Let's make journalism cool again, right?
Yeah, that's cool.
I think that I think what we need to do is talk more about the positive sides of journalism, of what the media, what these small newspapers, what organizations like the Tribune are doing to just encourage people to go into that business. I think we hear a lot of the negative, and we've said a lot of that too. You can't make any money. That's true, but it's also not true. So if you're really interested and passionate about going into journalism, go for it, because it is. I mean, I have worked in politics. I've worked in the state capitol on policy. I've done a lot of really big things in my life.
Coffee shop.
I had a coffee shop, which I don't know. The coffee shop was pretty awesome, but the most rewarding thing I have ever done in my life is this silly, crazy little newspaper thing that just fell in my lap. And so I think we just need to talk more about that, because it is just it's just something you can be proud of. And your kids, I mean, my daughter would say, kind of like what Lori said, it's hard when your mom's the newspaper editor, but she's also very proud of what I do. So I think that's some of it right there.
I love that, making journalism cool again. I think that I don't want to sugarcoat it. Every day it's a little bit of a game of survival and Lord of the Flies and how do we just keep the lights on? That said, and I think the Tribune is very earnestly trying to do this now in a way that hasn't always been true, is that we are thinking very strategically about what is the news ecosystem of Texas, and how do we make sure that we're not going to maybe solve the news desert issue, but how do we make sure that we have a sustainable, thriving news ecosystem so that, whether it is, folks like Suzanne or the Amarillo Tribune, which is a new nonprofit that just started up in the Panhandle as well, or, the Houston Chronicle, the Austin American Statesman. How do we make sure that we're all working together to create the opportunity to keep journalism going, right? Journalism used to be a very, very, very cutthroat industry. I mean, when there were two newspaper towns, I mean, newspaper wars were historic and epic, and they did dirty tricks to one another, and you know, the Washington Post and the New York Times are still kind of battling it out, right, to a little bit. But we have to figure out how to work together so that all of you in this room who want to be a journalist can be a journalist and can, you know, make a life doing this really, really, really cool work. I will just say, as much as an obligation as we have, I would also just say, if you want to go into journalism, and I hope if you want to, you do, be sure that you know how to do a little bit of everything, because you will probably be starting out at a smaller newspaper, you know, or a smaller news organization, where you're going to have to do, you know, a little bit of everything. So do not think that you're going to, you know, graduate and go out and start working for the New York Times. If you do that, really, really cool, and I want to know you, but be just prepared to like start small. And actually, there's a great book called Letters to a Young Journalist by Sam Friedman, I think is the name. And he actually says, you know, embrace the idea of having a long career in journalism. Don't be in a rush to, you know, get to a Pulitzer. It will come, but work and start to build that body of knowledge, build those skills in the sense, because this is a craft, right? And so, you know, really take your time to learn how to do good journalism, and you will find a way to make a career out of it.
Okay, sorry, I didn't know. Okay. So I work for the newspaper at school. I work for Hilltop Views. I'm one of the copy editors. So I have a question for mostly you, because of your local, you're the one-man show. But for both of y'all, I guess, if you want to, what does your editing process look like? Because I know that for a bigger organization, there will obviously be a lot of people that might be looking at a piece once it's ready to go out. But for a one-man show, what does that look like? Because it's just really interesting for me as someone who's in the middle of the editing process, like what it looks like for you.
Messy. So I actually just put before I drove, I was in Dallas earlier today. I sat at my laptop this morning and I finished the newspaper by 2 o'clock, which is my print deadline, and then hopped in the car to drive here. So this is all fresh on my mind.
We could have carpooled.
Yeah, true. It's just me. So I usually, I guess process-wise, I write articles, I try to edit and you know, review them. I drop them into we use InDesign, that's how we build our paper. I drop them into InDesign and then I try to edit a second time. But I have a lot of mistakes, and I have a little high school friend's high school son who often tells me where my mistakes are. So I make a lot of mistakes, to be honest. I haven't had any glaring, you know, headline issues or anything like that. But yeah, so it's just, I mean, it's just is what it is. But some days I tell them they're lucky they even got a paper. There are often times when I put that paper to bed and I go, oh, how did I pull that off again? So it's quite a process.
There are some tried and true tricks out there. Read the story out loud. Oh my God, read your story out loud. Number one. Number two, change the font. That's always a good one. Make it bigger, make it smaller, change a different typeface, trick your eyes, read the story backward. That's another fun one. So yeah, there are, God bless you for being a copy editor. God bless, like you want to talk about, you know, the last line of defense. My life has been saved by copy editors many, many, many times, and I miss them dearly, so.
Other questions? Question? Anybody else? Yes, Mia.
Just learn something. So
There you go. Change the font.
So I also come from a small town, not as small as Canadian, where our local newspaper, historic, trusted newspaper, did close down. And some of the writers there, they try to go into their own little news thing that's not as regularly kept up. And so I think in the community, the access to having trusted news is lacking now, and it's kind of led to Facebook pages, kind of putting in, hey, this is happening today, and then it kind of turns into like the topics page of what happens in the city. How do we go back to wanting to have like the community effort and like the civic engagement of like wanting to know like real actual news that's happening in a community? And I feel like that's something that's kind of been lost in certain areas now.
So, for some reason, the early colonial newspaper publishers are popping into my mind for some weird reason. There used to be such a high barrier of entry into journalism. Like you had to, basically it was rich white men. Like those were the publishers until really 2000, or the year 2000, right? Before the internet, you had to be a rich white man to be a newspaper publisher. And I mean, these printing presses are humongous, right? They cost millions of dollars. And today, any one of you could be a publisher. Any one of you. And many of you might already be. You might be, or the new term, creator, right? If you see a need, go and fill it. If you believe your community deserves good information, go be the bearer of that good information. It is hard, it is exhausting, but there are journalism service organizations, JSOs out there, who can help you and guide you. I'm thinking particularly of Lion Publishing. Like this is a nonprofit organization that works only with smaller news organizations to figure out how to create sustainable long-term journalism. They work with nonprofits, for-profits, public good corporations. There are, the Trusting News Source, that's another great JSO that you can tap into. There are more ways to share information than ever before. What it takes is, a little bit of ambition, a little bit of curiosity, passion for sure, and then going out and just starting with something small and seeing it grow, right? I mean, not to be cliche, but like every forest had to start with like a single tree, right? Every garden starts with a single seed. And I think that, if you want to make sure that there's good journalism out there, learn how to do it and then go and do it. Because again, anybody can do it now. You just want to make sure that you're doing it right and that you are, practicing being a good practitioner. And I would be really excited to see what you could do.
I agree completely. Don't worry about the median of which you put the information out, but just concentrate on the good information going out, right? So if Facebook is where your community is, then set up a really great, information page on Facebook and direct people there. And I think that one of the things that you could do is just find a niche. So find something that you want to talk about and just start there. Make it small, make it simple. Build that trust, that reputation around, whether it's following, the school board or the city council, or maybe it's about, encouraging a project in the community, like Lori talked about the nursing home, something that the community is doing that you could build, and just start there. Start very small, build that trust, be a great source of information, and it'll grow. It'll grow from there. And that's really, if you go back, let's go back to our founders. That's where it all started, right? Like they started talking about, we need a new government. And then they just started writing all this stuff. And then all of a sudden we had this whole 3 pillars of government, of, institutions out there. And it all started from just that. So that would be some advice I would give you.
I think we're at time. Unfortunately, I know. But I wanted to let the panelists know how much we appreciate all of you coming in. Nick, thanks for coming down from Dallas. Suzanne, thanks for coming. We've got our next event is December 2nd. It's the Civic Entrepreneurship Showcase. It's on campus at St. Ed's. And it is a showcase. I look at civics in an entrepreneurial, creative way, and what y'all are doing is entrepreneurship in action. That's exactly what entrepreneurs, we need entrepreneurship in the civic, in the journalism space. That is a critical skill, an important skill, and we often don't talk about that. I want to thank everybody for coming tonight. I really appreciate it. And please, JC's saying, if you're interested in giving, here you go. JC's the person to talk to. Thanks for coming, y'all. Have a great night.